I'd like either Sarah or Kathleen to say a few words on George's behalf as well. George passed away about 3 weeks ago. So Kathleen or Sarah?
I've been to, excuse me, leading from the Sandy. George was an extraordinary leader. And I think that those of you who had any chance to work with him over the years would have realized that. It was his vision that helped carry to fruition the fact that we have a library district. The Sandy area was very concerned about what was happening to the libraries in 2005, and he, with the Sandy city administration, formulated what to do and created a path that allowed the impetus for the measure to go forward. And if he had not done the leadership role, if he hadn't performed the leadership role that he had, and many of you know Jack Frick, who has come, and he was the treasurer of the PAC. And those two men, as far as I'm concerned, are the fathers of the library district. So thank you for recognizing him now, because his contribution was extraordinary. Thanks.
Sarah?
And he's also been wonderful for the Sandy community. He and his wife Colleen handily revitalized the Friends of Sandy Library. Created the Book Nook, which now gives an endowment each year of over $20,000 to the library for programming. So a wonderful man and a great leader, as Kathleen said. He's going to be missed.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't want to put Kathleen or Sarah on the spot, but I thought it was time to honor George's legacy and appreciate all that he did and continues to do, it sounds like, through his post-deceased actions. So thank you very much, Sarah, Kathleen, and everybody else who ever knew George. Thank you very much for his time. Thank George. So with that, why don't we go ahead and begin with introductions? Nick?
Nick Durfine, Oregon City Library. Greg Williams, Oregon City Library.
Bethany Schultz, Sandy Hook.
Sarah McIntyre, Sandy and Midland.
Melissa Kelly, Library Director for City of Lake Oswego. Natalie Smith, Gladstone Public Library Board of Director.
We'll see.
Jeff Lewis, Assistant County Council.
My name is Sarah Ekman. I'm with Clackamas County Department of Transportation and Development as an Assistant Director of our Community Services program, which includes libraries and library support services.
I'm Rick Peterson, Manager of Library Support Services.
I'm Graham Smith. I'm the Operations Supervisor at the Happy Valley Library.
Doug Erickson, Westland Public Library.
And who's Zooming with us today?
Desiree from, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Good.
Oh, Desiree from the Estacada Public Library.
Natalie McNown, Wilsonville Public Library.
Anybody else Zooming us? Okay. And
From the, can you hear me?
yes,
Okay, Grover Barnefeld from the Clackamas County Library District Advisory Committee, Oak Lodge Library.
Emma Sagor, Acting City Manager of Milwaukee.
Mitzi Olson, I'm sorry, Mitzi Olson, Library Manager for Oak Lodge and Gladstone Library.
Diana Hadley, Malala Library Director.
anybody else Zooming? We appreciate you all being here, and in the back, Kathleen, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Kathleen Drain, and here's an unincorporated resident of the Sandy area.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner. I'm David Goldberg, the Chair of the Oregon City Library.
Well, and I'm Al, and I thank you all for being here very much. The first thing I would also want to do is thank you all. Last year, if you remember, last July, we met, we proposed a letter to the Board of County Commissioners, which we did take. I took over and met with our county administrator, what would you call Gary? County administrator, okay. Met with Gary Schmidt, gave him the letter, and then it was introduced to the board. But I want to thank all of you because this was a letter that all 22 people had a hand in, which can be very difficult at times, having a committee edit something. But all of you had a hand and a stake in that letter, and that's why it was important that that letter represented all of us, not just one person or one library, but the entire Clackamas County Library District. So I appreciate all of you for the work that you have done. And I think one of the things we're going to do is, if I could jump into hearing from Sarah and Jeffrey on their work with city managers.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Paul, feel free to jump in as well, since you were on the board, are on the board to look at that.
Everybody.
We'll also share on the screen for those attending via Zoom.
Why don't we actually start with Paul? Paul, so this letter came to the board, and what did the board decide? And how did you make that decision?
Well, because, I want to be respectful to my colleagues and because of the odd vote on the approach, I don't think I didn't believe it was holistic. I believe a lot of things that are driving some of the challenges is money, finances. And I think there is a solution, from all sides. But I'm concerned that this solo approach is not really, the way we're gonna get to a win for everybody. And financial problems will, while some might be alleviated, this year, I think there's some outlying ones that need everyone at the table. And so I'll leave it there and let the months, and perhaps Sarah, do what the board has directed them to do. So.
Thank you, yes, so, LTAC wrote the letter that we received in August, the board had a policy session in November. And did direct staff to work with the cities, through the city managers to discuss the issues brought forward in a letter from LDAC to the Board of County Commissioners. So, in January, let's see here. We contacted the city managers about establishing this conversation around that. Policy session materials and the charge that came from the board to meet with them. And we did have a meeting, it was very specifically intended to focus on the topic of capital expenditures with library district funds. So we did put forward a proposed revision to attachment C to the master library IGA. And we ended up scheduling a meeting to talk through it with the cities. Because it was difficult to establish that opening conversation with strictly email. Trying to go back to too many things so here. So we met with them in February. And during that conversation, there was some consensus gained with the cities. And in that, we circulated a fourth amendment to them for review, in addition to a consolidated copy of the IGA that took into consideration all of the amendments prior to that. So there would be one clean copy. The consensus with the version that you have here with the city managers group was to leave section 2.1 as it is, which is use of funds. We then added some language in attachment C and removed the space standards. And Jeff will be able to speak more if any questions on some of these pieces. We adjusted the language to ensure it's consistent with the changes to attachment C. We had the goal of keeping the agreement at a high level as to how it spoke to the library, the use of the funds. And that was really the consensus that we took away from that meeting with the city managers. And our next step after that was to vet it with them, which we did. We sent it back. There was only one piece of feedback, and that was just in reference to the data that was used for the distribution formula being in 2008 number. So that of course does get updated each year. No other feedback was received after that initial meeting, and this revision went out. And so our next step with the city managers was to bring this forward to this body to discuss it and get your recommendation.
I think that's pretty much it. You decided to do this as a restatement because once we get too many amendments, it's hard to figure out exactly where our agreement is. So I thought let's streamline it that way. And also, you know, the reason it's done this way is the master order for the library district incorporated these threshold standards at the time, but sort of baked that into the master order as we looked at it. And so we're have those standards to go with. Unfortunately, it's kind of a, you know, they have changed over time, but that's the way they're drafted. They have some leeway, but the idea was it's consistent with the master order. You want to continue to honor that. So that's why those standards in particular pulled into the IGA, because some of them have been pulled in from the standard back at the time the IGA was first formed, and not all of them had, and still just be a little more complete, provide some guidance towards the use of these funds for facilities.
That brings us to today. So you do have a copy of the version that was circulated to the city managers here. Rick has it up there. I think the most conversation from my recollection really was the attachment C. That was included here. And you can see in red the facilities piece that with the modification as well as the very back page has threshold standards. We are open for questions.
Greg, looks like,
I don't want to wait till anybody else goes.
go ahead, Greg.
Nick's got a question.
Go ahead, Nick.
It's to have a very specific fund. And fund being used for capital.
In some circumstances, yes, it's consistent with threshold standards.
Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that if you've got a lot of examples, that really are dependent on what the usefulness of the facility is, what the extent you need to have invested into a facility to make sure that it meets the standards, provide the services consistent with the standard. It's not just one particular element. So an example could be a HVAC system goes out. That's normally a capital expenditure, but really it's necessary to keep the library. So it could range from that to something small, still capital expenditure, something larger, it depends. It's really something that it's library cities gonna have to make that analysis on a case by case basis. And I think that's really where we're at, is if library cities know their libraries, provide those services, they'll make those choices. And I really can't continue to keep it open if you can't have the facility in a state that can provide those services.
Okay, we're gonna get to Natalie. If you have questions on the Zoom, just raise your hand or a piece of paper or something so that we can see you. Natalie and then Greg.
So in the event, there might be, I don't want to use the wrong word, but who makes the final decision if those capital funds should be used for a specific situation? Is it the city manager or is it somebody at Clackamas County that makes that final decision?
I think for libraries that are owned by a city, it's the city and whatever their procedure is to make that final decision. And I know the city's the same. Sometimes it's delegated to the city manager, sometimes held with the city council themselves, make some of those choices at a certain threshold, depending on the charter. So for a city library, it's the city.
And they're the ones that are responsible and accountable for that choice.
Correct.
Greg and then Grover.
Thank you, Al. So I guess for clarification purposes. So the facility standards that are being put into attachment C, they were already incorporated into the IGA by reference. Because the attachment C says, you know, the parties agree that all library service providers shall strive to meet OLA threshold standards. With a particular emphasis. So we're restating something that's already in the standards that are incorporated by reference to the IGA. So my concern is just from looking for the future is, so in order to do this through this vehicle, we're gonna have to go to every city and ask them to consider this and approve this and expend mental energy on it. I am very I think we should be judicious about how many times we go to cities, our individual city councils and city commissions, asking them to take action on library issues. Because I worry that when we really need their engagement, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, their response is gonna be, well, we fixed that already. You know, we made a change. So I guess my question is, and not to put Commissioner Savas on the spot, is there another way to communicate this? Because this was in response to LDAC. This was a question from LDAC to provide some clarity on how funds can be used. Could the same thing not be accomplished in a different vehicle? You know, perhaps a board letter to LDAC explaining what you just said without necessarily having to go to every single city and having Rick and Sarah go to a commission and opening up those discussions. That's always been my big concern about doing it this way.
Possibly, but not the direction we were given. In this case, there have a discussion of how to approach this question with the cities, and I think letting the city have an opportunity to weigh this question is the direction we were given. So that's why we went to the city managers to start that conversation and circulating this, and we got limited feedback, of course, but it's supportive in its own way. We didn't have any objection, more of a question on some details. So yeah, other ways, but this is the direction that you're given at this time.
Grover?
Hi there. First of all, when was this document made available to me?
Which document is that?
The one that's on my screen right now?
It's being presented right now.
Okay, good. So there was no advance notice. I just want to make that point very clear. I'm not very good at seeing an extensive amount of legalese flying by on my computer screen without any advance notice to be able to study it. So I have a significant concern about the inclusion of LDAC, which leads me to my next point. We're still under an IGA that specifically says LDAC is the body to work out challenges and differences. And it sounds like there's already been a direction taken here that didn't include any input from LDAC. I appreciate that there was some opportunity without anybody in the LDAC world to know what went on in those side conversations. And I've done my best over all this time to find out what went on in any of those meetings, and not a word has been available. So this is the first time to see this. And LDAC, until the IGA has changed, the IGA still identifies LDAC as being the primary source of working out the differences, et cetera. And so I have a significant objection to even having this conversation to make any decisions about it this time. That's piece one. Piece two, that the only input that has gone into this so far, from what I've understood that you've said, is this has been the cities, and the cities only represent approximately a half of the funds that are being discussed here as far as how they're going to be used that are outside of what is spelled out in the IGA, as well as in the covenant that was made with the voters and taxpayers that spell out how the funding will be used specifically for library services. And the letter that we sent nearly a year ago, it was in June, we're in May now, has not had any reply other than this recommendation with no input from LDAC, and more importantly, no input from nearly 50% of the population whose funds we're speaking to, that is to change it from what was promised in 3310 and what was promised also in the IGA, or enumerated in the IGA. So I have a real concern about where we are in this conversation and what hope to follow anything that we have in place this is doing, and how this in any way addresses the letter that we spent months putting together. And then this completely sidesteps the reality that I was so thrilled, 7 years ago, when the library directors came forward with a concern about the long-term funding, particularly for smaller libraries. And I don't see how this is being addressed in that as well. So I'm really unclear how we could even be having this conversation with no advance notice, without LJAC being involved in any of the decision-making, and to look at what I can only see on the screen now, something about facilities. I can't turn pages. I can't do any of those things. So this is highly objectionable, and I find it to be inappropriate to have this meeting at this point, other than a strictly lightweight discussion. And when will we have to be able to see this in hard copy? So those are my comments and my significant concerns about the lack of inclusion or following the existing IGA or following the existing 3310. So that's it.
Thank you, Grover. Other questions or concerns or thoughts? Kathleen?
I don't want to speak if any library wants to speak first, so.
Go ahead.
Okay. My concern as an unincorporated citizen is that the method that was adopted by the BCC in their instruction to Jeff and Sarah is that it completely ignores the unincorporated residents that, while representing only 44% of the population in the district, provide 45% of the revenue overall. But if you take away the three biggest city libraries, you find out that the unincorporated residents disproportionately fund most of the libraries. Take away the Midland Library, take away the Oak Lodge Library, which are 100% unincorporated. And you get a situation that 7 out of the 13 total libraries, you have unincorporateds paying more per capita than the city residents. And as a result of that, while the population of the unincorporateds in each of the different service districts might appear to be a certain number, when you figure out their financial contribution, it is disproportionately bigger. So I'll take Sandy, my own service area. The unincorporateds represent 54% of the population, but provide 66% of the funding. And this is not an outlier. And this process is totally ignoring this contribution that is being given by the unincorporateds, with the cities, not surprisingly, more than happy to take some of the money from the unincorporateds to fund a city asset in their real estate portfolio, in which the unincorporateds have no vested monetary interest. This would be different if we had a true capital district where the libraries were owned by each of the service districts. That's not the construct we have. And the situation that is being posited now is disenfranchising a significant portion of the population. And we have a legal changeover from what was a capital district, a service district, when approved by the voters, to a capital district with no approval by the unincorporated at all. And that to me is wrong. It also seems to me that it is very contrary to the BCC's stated policy goal of being equitable, inclusive, and transparent. Because this deal, which was negotiated just with city managers, there's no transparency there. Where were the unincorporated in this process? Nowhere. So I ask you to reconsider what's happening here. I also ask you to keep in consideration what Robert was saying. The directors told us in 2018 they didn't have enough money already to provide the services that were being requested. I'm talking about the capital part of it. I'm talking about elections, hours of service, the programming that they want to do. This is only going to get worse. If you allow invasion of this service district revenue for capital purposes, You're starting that death spiral that we had in 2005, all over again. We should not go there. We know we have a capital need of some sort, but let's deal with that in the new district, not out of the current construct that doesn't have the leeway in it to allow it. Thank you.
Definitely. Other comments or thoughts? Go ahead, Paul.
Friendly clarifying question.
Yes, please.
So when you said that the majority of the funding is provided by the incorporated, you're talking about the library district funds, not what the city contributes, is that correct?
That's correct.
So there would be then really some math to actually take city by city and say the city's contributing to their general fund.
Yes.
Might be per capita, possibly higher or lower than you think, right?
It could be, it is not in fact.
And the other thing I should have said earlier, is that in 16 years or 17 years since the population of the boundary were drawn, populations have gone up everywhere. I don't know how much of that has been unincorporated or incorporated. I don't know what the boundaries are actually reflective of in the area. And so I think really the funding question, when you throw all that on top of it and you see that these are part of the metrics in which things are being determined, I think that the boundaries of the population also need to be updated so we get some better numbers. But I didn't want it to be, my point of asking that question is happening respectfully, is just to make sure that people understand that funding for libraries is not just the district. And the district was never meant to provide 100% of funding for libraries. It was to augment the existing funding that cities provide to libraries.
I would agree totally with your statement, but in practicality, when you look at the data that was included in our annual reports, which are great, right? Because they in fact identify those contributions by each city above and beyond just the district revenue. And if you look at their use, aside from some of these west side libraries, and you look at the east side libraries, it does not adjust equivalently for the contribution by the unincorporated. Now, the data that I gave you is based on the 23-24 distribution that I have the population data from that particular just provided source.
Jeff and Sarah, when this came to you, how did you involve the city managers with unincorporated areas? Was that part of the charter that was given to you to consider the unincorporated areas in any discussion?
City managers, they understand that unincorporated population is a large portion of the community they serve. That is part of the discussion. So it's always part of working in city libraries. I mean, that's just our library district is set up such that each library has a portion of the unincorporated. So that's always a concern, and our representatives from our county library, so now also a library city under the agreement, but talk about that as well. You know, is there some difference in how it's being handled? Is there concerns that are being raised in a change like this that they feel would be something of discussion? They understand that they listen to unincorporated people in their own meetings as well, and they share that with us. So, you know, I think it's always a big component of any discussion for the library district.
But did the cities address it, particularly when they met with you? They said, well, our unincorporated area is this much, we want to involve them somehow.
Well, we know how much of the other library service areas are incorporated. So I think that the conversation is, do we or do they see something that's in particular going to disadvantage the unincorporated area? Or is this, as the cities looked at it, a way to continue to provide the services that are necessary so they can serve the entire library service area? It's not so much, do we serve the city versus the unincorporated? It's more, how do we serve our entire library service area? It's more the thrust of the conversation. It's like, this is something that we look at as an integrated community for the library that they represent.
Right?
Just a couple of things. I did want to address the unincorporated folks not being represented, and I'm fortunate enough to have my board chair here tonight, who is actually a resident of the unincorporated area, service area. So David, you can call me on any of what I'm about to say. But when we actually discussed this in a library board meeting, so I want to remind folks that our library boards are made up of both city and unincorporated residents, proportionally, to our service area population. So in our case, I can only speak for our case, our board chair and vice chair are both residents of the unincorporated area. We discussed what was being discussed about this IGA update, and we didn't have any examples, but I was able to lead, to go through a discussion with the board. Here's what I understand is being looked at. Here's some ways they're looking at addressing, this request from LDAC and updating the IGA. And we went through options, and one of the options we looked at was basically this, a restatement of service standards. And our library board considered it. They made a recommendation to, they passed a resolution, which I passed on to our city manager, which I'm sure influenced, Camp during his conversation at the city manager's group. So I do want to say that I do believe unincorporated residents certainly do have a voice in city library, being part of those advisory bodies, and that library directors do listen to what those concerns are and try to represent them. And I do believe our city commissions and our city managers listen. David, or Nick, would you disagree with any of that?
Well, I just think we've done we've done a formal survey to make sure that the meeting and bring that to the city. I think we're doing an improving job. In fact, we're regular meeting this week with one of the community in our unincorporated area to listen and do more outreach. So I think we're doing a reasonable job of that, and I think their voice is represented through myself and our board vice chair. So I don't have that concern. I also don't share your concern about capital. I don't think it's down a spiral that I think as long as the funds are being used appropriately for delivering library services to the population that we have, that is legitimate use of police district funds. But I don't want to get into that leak. That's a very sticky issue, and I understand it's not on. Just disagree with it. I think the real issue that we've been patient about, and I think COVID interrupted, of course, is what's the future going to be? We know the 39 cents is inaccurate, just is. It was when it was passed, let alone now. And I think we have a good chance of getting this population. That's a 3-year process at minimum that runs several things. And particularly the complication of having this many cities that we have in these 3 years. I think we just got to get on with it and stop messing around with what seems to be working reasonably. Nobody seems to be abusing it. And I think that's the agenda that concerns me as board chair. As I look.
Thank you very much, David. And David, when you speak, and Kathleen also, just let us know who's speaking. So because we do an oral transcription, and it's nice to know who was speaking when. Right?
Just one more comment, sorry, and just to respond to one thing Kathleen said, and we're going to get to this in the next presentation, but yes, the library directors did present a letter to LDAC in 2018 about the insufficiency of funds. And just to make one correction, Kathleen, the insufficient, we specifically stated the insufficiency of funds was concerned regardless of whether or not district funds were used for capital. So it was not, we did not present it as if we don't use it for capital, we're fine. And if we use it for capital concern, it was, we are concerned with the 39 cents, regardless, of how it gets used, because we're not sure that this is enough to help us move forward. That was the concern that the library directors expressed back.
We are sure. It's not.
Yes.
Yes.
Is there, before we get to Rick, Grover, you had your hand up?
I do, thank you. So I have to suggest that I have a concern that having a unincorporated resident serving on a library advisory board isn't exactly having the voters who voted for what was promised in 3310 as a full-on service-only district, says it in there 7 times, that they actually, and I'm one of them, can actually speak for that population for 2 reasons. One, because we rarely, if any, do any significant amount of outreach to find out what those people really want, those people who did vote for and who are currently being taxed. But secondarily, in almost every case, the library district advisory boards are actually under the control of the local cities. They have no ability to go beyond the city authority, because usually they are managed by the library director and they have to get permission from the advisory, in their case, most of them are councils, to be able to speak or provide their opinions to a broader population. And I know that one example, which I won't specify, but if some other people would like to, city council specifically denied that the library advisory board could in fact correspond with, advise other unincorporated people about their concerns about this. And I do believe that was a unanimous opinion of that library advisory board. So to suggest that there is adequate representation of the will and opinion of unincorporated by a board that is not chosen by those said people is a stretch for me. So I have a concern with that. The other is the unincorporated have no, using that same logic moving forward, have no impact on the decisions or choices made by city managers, because city managers work for the city council, which is elected by the city residents. And then lastly, there was a mention about seeming abuse. We wouldn't have written that letter to the Board of County Commissioners. We started on it nearly 2 years ago, but we wouldn't have written that letter if in fact in the LDAC current reality, we could say that we were able to influence the individual cities who were in fact in significant behavior outside of the guidelines listed in 3310 and the outside the guidelines that are listed in the IGA, unless their interpretation is so radically different than mine and many other people's. So we were asking for clarification about those details. The bad news is the results come back is it didn't question that. It didn't question what the IGA said. It's to change the IGA so that they can continue doing that. And I just have a significant amount of difficulty with that. And I totally agree with the reality that when the library directors, bless their hearts, brought that to our attention in 2018, it was that under the current reality, regardless of what's being siphoned off for capital, many libraries are going to face a stark reality of not have sufficient funds. But the other part that's not being addressed in any of this is the allocated costs. And that is also in the letter. And that hasn't been addressed here at all. And the allocated costs, there are examples in our history for those who have been around long enough where cities were actually clearly, well, there's 5 departments and it costs this much to do this, so everybody has to pay 20%. Had nothing to do with what the IGA said, which is supposed to be a proportional, is a direct service to the library, because these are not regular tax dollars. These are library district funds in alignment with what 3310 said they're to be aligned for, which is library services, direct. And the IGA spells it out pretty clearly. And that's not being done. And that isn't being addressed in the little bit I've seen in this document about the runaway allocated costs. So I cannot see how we can move forward in this meeting at this time with this little notice in any way have any respect for the people who are on LDAC, trying to perform the duties that we are assigned by the IGA to do. This is not it. This is outside those bounds. And I don't know where else to go with this, but we cannot move forward on this under these current circumstances. We'd need certainly a lot more input from the people who are not represented in this conversation. So thank you.
Anybody else has a comment?
I have a question, Al.
Yes,
Just want to ask staff, so this was only made available today?
tonight is the first time we received it.
Right. That's accurate. Okay.
This is the first time I got it was 7 months. Anybody else had it ahead of time? Bethany?
Yeah, I didn't get it ahead of time either, and I do think that's something, like, I also agree with Grover, it's very hard to get something like this and then just decide what we think about it in like 10 minutes, so I also disagree with that.
I didn't see it until this evening either, so.
Is there a proposal on the table to maybe defer any decision on this until the next meeting? Give everybody a chance to look at this.
I guess I have a clarifying
Yes,
question.
please.
What is LDAC's decision-making authority on this matter?
Well, it would basically be working with the group, this is my interpretation, working with the group and saying, yeah, this sounds good. I mean, it's really up to the Board of County Commissioners when it comes down to it. They
Yes.
receive the letter, they need to make something happen. LDAC, the idea was we would have a chance to look at it and comment on it before it goes back to the board. That was how it was supposed to work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick.
That was my interpretation, yeah, and that was, I sent this out today because we discussed it today. And I thought it was more of a presentation to this group, and then the group could provide feedback to the board at that point. I did not think it was something that needed to be provided ahead of the meeting. That's all.
So go ahead. Yeah.
I think that answers my question. I just wanted to clarify if LDAC had decision-making authority, or my understanding is that the group is advisory to the Board of County Commissioners, and that really the Board of County Commissioners gets to make the decision.
We were supposed to review it, and if we had any, like Grover had, Kathleen did, some thoughtful comments, present that back to Jeff and Sarah to work with, and then to take those back to the board saying, LDAC reviewed it. They aren't, it's not up or down by LDAC, but it's review, and here are the comments and considerations and concerns that LDAC had, and then they present that back to the board. Is that your understanding, Jeff and Sarah, as well?
That's correct.
Yeah, because this was in my mind, it was a presentation, informational presentation on the work that's been done to show this group, because this group isn't making a decision. This group can review this now and then provide feedback.
What's the intent of today to provide it so that there is time for you to digest it? We wouldn't expect you to do it while we sit here and stare at you. Thank you for clarifying.
Kathleen here speaking. I would like Mr. Munns, if he could, to tell us whether county council has changed their legal opinion from that which was expressed in a lawsuit in 2016, in which one of the paragraphs in the filing by the county, which is subject to their affirming that it is correct, was that attachment C of the master IGA, and this is from the paragraph 26 of the county's answer for offenses and counterclaims, says that it does not allow, this is speaking to service standards, it does not allow expenditure of library district annual distributions for capital purposes. The service standards are based on Oregon Library Association guidance, but deliberately did not include size of facility to avoid the suggestion that library district funds could be expended on capital expenses. Close quote. Is there a change in the position that county is taking regarding district as a service district with no capital permitted.
First, I didn't have that lawsuit, so I know you quoted that, and I say you put it.
Restored.
Correct. So I stated what the opinion of our office is today, and that's what's incorporated in this document, consistent with the advice that I've given the county commissioners on this matter, so that, if that was a different opinion in this, it may have changed, and that is,
How does it change, Jeff?
legal opinions change. So
Truly,
I don't want to get into an argument about this here, I don't think it's an appropriate forum for this conversation. I think in this advice given the county commissioner is consistent with what's incorporated in the master order. And if the position was different in the past, legal opinions change. Every case goes to court and both lawyers think they're right and somebody comes out right. Sometimes the judge is wrong for the court of appeals. So those opinions change over time. I think we're trying to be aware of and sensitive to the history, what's in these documents, and be consistent with Oregon law and these threshold standards. Kind of the history of past capital district affected some of those opinions. Those were all part of the history here, but I think where we stand today, our advice is correct. What was stated in the defense in that lawsuit, in the full context, it's hard to say. But we are sharing this opinion today and it's consistent with the direction given before and the documents. But thank you for, there's a different history, we've gone through this, and I think that's something that for different points and opinions throughout the history, so appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
my point is, the voter should be able to decide this, and a referral, if it is the decision of the BCC and of the city managers, that they choose to change this document, to change the nature of the district, it would be easy for the BCC to refer the question to the voters in November and just say, are you good with this or not? And that would take care of the disenfranchised nation.
Oh, Grover, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to, unless the IGA has been suspended, I'd like to read you from 4.14 of the IGA, just a small portion. And it says enforcement of terms. Oh, good, you're going to have it right there. I love it. 4.14. There we go. The parties here too recognize that the district is relying on the good faith and commitments of the library cities to utilize the funds provided by the district in the promised manner. The parties expect that to the extent that there is any non-compliance or breach of this agreement, the parties will discuss such non-compliance or breach in the district advisory committee and encourage any effort forward toward compliance. I could read more, but that's the key part of it. This is the duty of, as in the IGA, for the LDAC to do this. We asked for the Board of County Commissioners to provide a clarification of the wording that is in the IGA that has been misinterpreted by some or misinterpreted by some others. But in either case, the common interpretation is not there because the idea of allocated costs and the idea of capital expenditures is widely seen differently and applied differently. And it is the duties of LDAC, not a subgroup, not other people, to do their best to resolve this. And it isn't a matter of we get to say, yeah, we like your decision, whatever you all made that we didn't have any party to and we had no advanced knowledge of. So I clearly think this needs to be, I don't know if the right word is tabled, but I don't think there's any opportunity to move forward with this last minute secretive. I will call it secretive because you guys did a great job of keeping every bit of this under wraps. And that's not the good faith part that's listed in this agreement. At least that's not how I interpret it. So until we have a chance to catch up and LDAC has a chance to have a meaningful discussion, I don't see how we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. I don't, in good faith to Jeff and Sarah, I don't think it was secretive on their part to say, well, this is, you know, within there. I think this is their first opportunity to come and talk with us. Yes, would have been nice to have this ahead of time, no doubt about that, but I don't think they were operating in a secret fashion. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt to say they're working hard with the cities, with the Board of County Commissioners to craft something and then bring it back here for our discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, Jeff, or Sarah.
Al, one question I have.
Yes.
To Grover's point, I'm not taking sides, I'm neutral here, but are the people online right now? Are they, the only part of this they can see is what's on the screen? They
No,
can't.
it's in the, it was sent in the chat at the same time it was.
Oh, it's in the chat. Okay.
Give me a
Yeah,
break.
but everyone, yeah, I'm just curious if everyone online actually is able to open that and read that, but I do think it is, in all fairness, and it's usually practice to send things of this detail, you know, in advance. That's typically.
Yeah, and like I said, that was maybe on me and my misinterpretation of what a presentation is like this, where we're not getting, it's just sharing a report back. So, yeah, that completely was me. Yeah. And it will also be emailed out to the group for those that aren't online or online, so.
And earlier on, there was a question from the lady there about, I guess, really essentially the role and how I interpret it. So sections 1.2 and 3.3 spell out what this committee is charged with. And there's some detail, especially in 3.3. But I'm sure that maybe some people have never really seen this before. How many people have seen this before?
Well, the old version.
Okay.
The older version, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I can't see what you're holding up there.
That's it. You've seen it, you agree with them all.
We just got it, we all just got it at 7.
But all the library.
I have read the old.
Yes. Yeah.
I would like to ask, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jeff or Sarah, would you be willing to come back in a month or 2 months after we've had a chance to look at this and say, okay, here's some of our thoughts, here's some of our concerns and adjustments at that time? Would that be fair for you too?
No problem, not just on this issue, if there's something that we can help with.
Sure.
Happy to be here.
Would everybody, I'm sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
I just wanted to say, you know, and listening to everyone. You know, if I needed to give input or. I would really like to sit down and have a work session with our library board and hopefully invite our city administrator. To get their input as well, before I was comfortable giving any input about the new changes and additions. Because I'm of the belief that I think this. And we've had this conversation so many times, I want to start moving forward. You know, I appreciate the effort to try to make it a more streamlined document, but I still think we're looking at a rewrite, but that's just my opinion. Because every little time we make a change, there's, you know, it's hard to please everyone. I understand that. But I'm all about just making it fair and equitable for everybody in the service district. You know, whether you're in the city or you're in an unincorporated, it needs to be across the board uniformed. So, yeah.
Would everybody be amenable to say, come maybe in 2 months? It gives you time to work with your local board in 2 months and revisit this. Let me go to people on the screen first. Pardon me, Rick, could you call them out to see, we'll begin with you, Grover. You amenable to coming back in 2 months?
I certainly would, assuming that we will have a chance. I loved what Natalie just had to. We are representatives of our board, our local library boards, who are in turn representing our constituents. So to have a meaningful conversation with them is very important for me and us. And this last minute stuff is not a new thing in the world. I mean, the agenda, I think it's state law says we're supposed to get it 6 days in advance or 7 or whatever. And this is a listed item on there and we didn't get that report. And I noticed that doesn't happen in other places like at the BCC, et cetera. But in addition to that, I'm also have another significant concern about, I didn't get the budget for the library. And I don't know how many other people, because we're all in Clackamas County. So we didn't get the budget until in the last, 5 days or something. There's not an opportunity for us to do our fiduciary duty to represent the taxpayers And in all the setting up of all this, the boards are supposed to be the representatives of the taxpayers or the residents. And we don't get a chance to do that, to get last minute stuff for things that have already been laid out in other rooms. So I'm sorry about the secret comment, but they certainly weren't made available to us. And it does say multiple times in the IGA, as well as in 3310, that we are supposed to be the representatives overseeing this. And I didn't say we're the decision makers, but we are the representatives of that body. And we don't have a chance to make a meaningful recommendation. So I'm okay with that, as long as my library board has a chance to meaningfully go over this. And I do appreciate Natalie's comment about having our city manager, Gary Schmidt, be present at that meeting.
Thank you, Grover. But Grover, you're all right if we move this on for like 2 months down the road? That's what I'm asking.
Certainly, until there's adequate time, I do believe this body would be the one should make the recommendations according to the IGA, as opposed to our request for a clarification of the IGA. This is not a clarification of the IGA, which is what we requested. So, absolutely, at least that much time, but enough time for us to make that recommendation, because we are the district advisory committee representing all the library boards. That this wasn't made by us. So of course, as long as it takes is where I am with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Grover. Deidre? You all right, postpone, coming back in 2 months? Desiree.
Yes. That sounds good.
Natalie?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss this with Shasta, who's not present, so that'll be good.
Do we have any other LDEC members on the, on that? Okay. How about here? Are there any objections to coming back in 2 months?
Do we need to make a motion and have a vote?
Fine with that? Sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we have an appropriate amount of time to review the changes with our library boards and citizens.
Other
me
Natalie
and-
seconds.
Pardon?
Said
Is-
other
is-
Natalie seconds.
Thank you.
Let me ask this, is 2 months sufficient time?
I believe it would be.
Speaking for my library, it'll be tight. We aren't meeting in June. And so we would be addressing that in July. This will be running up pretty close to this timeline. I think, I don't know how it works in other places, but I believe sometimes there are meetings in the summer that are not held because of
Yes.
and something, so.
But
A
I
little
don't want to wait.
bit more time, some cities.
Good point. I just don't want to wait too long. I think these folks have been taking the time, so I want to get back to them and say, okay, here's our thoughts. Exactly. Sure, the Board of County Commissioners wants to move forward too, I hope. Okay, so we have a motion and it's been seconded. All in favor of meeting back in 2 months to discuss this, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All opposed? Say nay. Hearing that, I hear a unanimous decision to come back in 2 months, Rick. Okay. I want to thank everybody very much for the comments. I know this is the first time you saw the document, which makes it a little bit difficult, but I do want to thank Jeff and Sarah for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate what you're going through, hearing us for the first time as well. We hear from you. Thank you very much. We want to move on now, and I think we want to hear from Greg representing the library directors on their work. And this was sent out ahead of time.
Thank you, Al. I'm looking at Rick. I don't know how we,
Yeah.
all right. So the good news is you won't have to listen just to me, because I've cashiered a couple of my library director colleagues to help take some of this presentation. So thank you very much. We're very glad, we're very appreciative of having some time before you tonight. My name is Greg Williams. I am the library director at the Oregon City Public Library. I am also this year's chair of our Link Directors Group. For those of you who might not know, our library directors get together once a month and we talk about issues that are facing the district, how we can cooperate, collaborate more closely, and what are some of the initiatives that we want to see happen to improve library service for all Link library patrons. So tonight, we've been working a long time, you're gonna hear about this, we've been working on a strategic direction for the entire cooperative, entire Link cooperative. And we're really pleased to be able to share that tonight. So we've got a short presentation that's gonna go through, some of the work that we've done. Everybody should have received a bunch of documents. We are not going to read through those documents in their entirety today because we are here until midnight. But we'll take a look at a few of those and we'll all, of course, make ourselves available for questions. With that, let's go on. So, so what we're gonna look over in our presentation today is, we're gonna give some information. Sarah and Melissa are going to give some information about how we got to where we are developing the components of the strategic plan. Then we are going to go through at a high level, just discussing some of those components. And then we are gonna end on kind of a request we're making from LDAC and all of our other stakeholders to support this plan and support the cooperative moving forward into the future. So next slide, please, right? All right, so I am going to, we coordinated this via email earlier this afternoon, so forgive me if my transitions are a little shaky. So now I think over to Sarah and Melissa.
Great. Well, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the work that we did at the beginning of the strategic planning process. We decided that we wanted to get together.
Just state who you are.
Oh, pardon me, Melissa Kelly, Library Director, City of Lake Oswego. And I wanted to share a little bit about the process that we went through to develop the strategic plan. We started, and this is a bit zoomed in, so you can't see the full timeline, but we started back in spring of 2022, thinking about, we're coming to the end of our to 2022 strategic plan. We need to start thinking for the next few years here. And as you know, we were coming out of COVID at that time, and there was a lot that had changed in the world that we needed to reconsider as we thought about our next few years and how to move forward. So we developed shared goals for our retreat and for our strategic planning process in general, for all of the libraries to share their needs and aspirations for Link and for their libraries, to build trust and connection between Link partner libraries, especially coming out of COVID. We needed to do more trust building again. And again, to identify that overlap for our shared Link strategic direction and goals. All of our libraries have a lot of overlapping goals, but we also have some individual goals that we're all working on as well. So we wanted to see, where did we overlap? But before we even got into that retreat session, we did some pre-work. Of course, reviewing our 19 to 2022 strategic plan and the progress made. We had made quite a bit of progress, even with COVID in the mix there, so we were proud of that. And then each director took some time really thinking about what their future vision was for Link. And we all individually submitted our individual vision statements for Link. And then we put together a word cloud of our collective vision and started out our retreat with a reflective conversation around, what is our collective vision? Where do we overlap? Where are we aligned? So that was a really great way to start out our day. And then we spent most of our retreat day working on the exercise of figuring out what were our main goals that we did agree on. One of the things we did is we each got 5 sticky notes. Each director wrote their top 5 items. So we were limited to just 5. And then we stuck those up on the wall, and then we're able to talk about them together and group them by themes to really see, again, what were our collective imperatives. And so we're going to talk more about those top 3 goals that all of us as Link could agree on working together as we move forward. And again, that's for Link Cooperative, but aligned with our individual library and city plans and goals as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about the next.
So you can move forward. Yeah, right, click that one. The last one. Perfect. So this has already been brought up, but the Link strategic plan is intended to articulate the initiatives we plan to undertake as a cooperative. And the plan does not supplant any of our local strategic plans. We each have local strategic plans, so it should complement and support our local strategic plans as well. So we can move on, right? So in order to continue work on the development of strategic imperatives and initiatives and finalize our high-level strategic direction, a subcommittee of the directors group was formed. Initially, this group consisted of Greg Williams, Melissa Kelly, and myself, Sarah McIntyre. And then eventually, Brent Husher from Milwaukee and Mitzi Olson from Clackamas County, joined us. So the mission and vision. So both of these, came from, so we started with the imperatives, when we were drafting our plan. So we had the imperatives to work with, and taking from that, the work we did, the subcommittee drafted the vision and mission, the initial vision and mission statements, and took them back to the entire Link directors group. So let's see. So these were our final vision and mission statements that are on screen. And then we recommended and implemented a process to seek input from Link staff and stakeholders to develop our core values statements. So we came up with, I think, is it five core value statements. So we sent out a value statement questionnaire to all of the committees within Link. So we have multiple committees within Link that work together in different areas. So we have like an adult services one, a teen services one, a children's services committee. So all of these committees got together to discuss the core values, and then I did the process with my library board, and I know a number of library boards participated as well. So we tried to get as much information as we could. So the value statements started with a lot of these things that you see at the beginning of these statements. We defend, we protect, we value, we respect, we provide, we communicate, we encourage, we use, we work, we plan, and we manage. And those statements were just meant to get people thinking about all of our work in libraries and what we really believe in as our values. So then, after we got all of those questionnaires, I synthesized the information into groups of like ideas. And as a subcommittee, we met and worked through all of those ideas to try to incorporate all of them into those 5 statements. So it was a very interesting process, and I think we did an amazing job of doing that. We took them back to the directors, and those statements are our final statements that we can put on the screen. So now we have the imperatives, the vision, the mission, the core value statements finalized, and we got to work on the tactical plan. So the tactical plan is really the boots to the ground, what we're going to work on in each area to achieve our strategic direction. So we drafted a detailed tactical plan, which is in the packet Rick set out, that outlines tactics and tasks. And then we added roles and responsibilities. So we added a DG champion for each tactic, and a Link group who is going to accomplish the actual work for each one. And I will turn it back over to Greg.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Sarah. If you can go back one, Rick, back to the round, one more. Thank you. So we're gonna just go quickly through kind of the hierarchy of strategic and tactical initiatives that we have. So like Sarah said, we're gonna start at the top. So at the very top, our first, the first component of our strategic direction was we identified these 3 particular imperatives. And they were listen to our communities, adapt to community needs, and share our story. And we spent a lot of time refining these, going back and forth, and trying to distill down at a very high level what we wanted to accomplish with this plan. We'll kind of explore how those develop into more concrete things, but the one thing I want to stress on this is these are meant to be cyclical as well. So this is meant to be kind of an iterative process, something that we go through on a regular routine basis. Listen to our communities, we gather input, we gather information, we make changes where we can to adapt to those community needs. And then we share back with the community, hey, here's what we've done. You know, here are the changes we made, here's what we tried to do to provide better services. And then we start over, then we ask, how do we do? and we listen to our communities and we adapt and then we give information back out. And so in theory, I'm a very, I like as least amount of work possible. In theory, these imperatives could just work forever and ever, you know, we just keep going round and around. And we just change kind of the imperatives and the initiatives under them. So broad level, those were kind of the three strategic areas we wanted to focus on as a cooperative. Okay, next slide, please, Rick. So then, as part of our discussion and talking with our staff and pulling out some keywords, under each one of those, we identified, okay, what are a couple of high-level initiatives? How, you know, what does it mean? You know, what do we want to do when we listen to our communities? What's most important for us to do right now in the next 3 years to make sure that we're able to listen to our communities? So we developed, out of that, we came up with 9 high-level initiatives that each go into one of those buckets. And when you look at this cycles plan, a lot of the things you see here are setting up some infrastructure so that we can do this more efficiently as we go forward. So for example, one of them is, you know, listen to our communities. We really want to do that. One of the high level initiatives we had was develop and implement a strategy and a framework for unified engagement and data collection. Because we don't do that as a cooperative right now. Every single library does their own surveying and goes out and talks to their residents, which is great, but we don't do that as a cooperative, and we felt there's lots of opportunity to get some really good information to do that as a cooperative. And cheapskate that all library directors are, there's also a good opportunity to save some money. If we are all, you know, if we're all doing something, let's see if we can all do it together and make it a little cheaper. So that's kind of how the next level down of initiatives. So we just got together and said, okay, what is most important for us to do right now under these 3 buckets? Next slide, please. So that's kind of the strategic work. Then we got into the tactical plan. Said, okay, we kind of know what we want to do. And like Sarah said, then we decided, okay, how are we actually gonna get this work done? Because there's only 11 of us in the directors group, right? And so we cannot all by ourselves take on the entire work of trying to move our cooperative forward. So we decided, okay, first we have to have some specific ways and things we're going to do to make these happen. And then, as Sarah said, we wanted to identify for each one of these initiatives, we have a director group champion, somebody who this resonates with, or who says, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna bird dog this the process. And they're gonna be the ones who kind of take a little ownership of it. Whoever we identify to work on this, they're gonna be their primary liaison, and they're just gonna help make sure that we don't just end up 3 years from now with all these initiatives on a piece of paper that never get done. The other thing we did, as Sarah mentioned, is we went through and we have assigned specific responsibility for some of these. So some of these are to our individual committees, Sarah said, our adult services committee, our youth services committee. Some of them we've assigned to ourselves as directors, especially the ones that have more budgetary impact or, you know, larger impacts. We wanted to make sure that we had a good conversation about that. There are some groups that we identified, some of these initiatives, these tasks and tactics that we identified, we don't have a great, so we're going to create. So for example, one of them is a data analysis. We realized we want to make better use of data going forward. We don't really have a group in our cooperative with all the really smart data nerds who like digging into this. So this is something we have to do. And we're going to have to figure out the resources on that because everybody's time is limited, but yeah, this is important. So we decided that as we go forward, we need to make it real clear who we're asking to do this, who's championing this, and making sure that we allocate resources. So, and I put a little footnote there on the initiatives. There were 9 of them. When you look at the tactical plan, there are only 8. That's because one of the initiatives was create a mission, vision, core values. Yeah, did it. So we decided it needs to be on the tactical plan. You know, pat ourselves on the back for a couple of them. Okay, so you all got this documents, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just wanted to kind of walk through it so you can kind of, you know, to make sure that our thought process is clear. So again, on the left, we start at the very high strategic level, right? So we have our imperative, listen to our communities. And then for this initiative, develop and implement the strategy and framework for unified engagement data collection. That was this specific initiative. So, okay, we got together and discussed, okay, how do we actually do that? What's going to be required to do that? So we decided we need to explore link-wide data collection methods for example, survey, listening session, focus group testimonials to find out what people want or need from Link. So it's a concrete action that we can take to achieve that initiative. And then, okay, now we gotta get to the signing, making sure that this work actually gets done. So for that particular tactic, we got 2 tasks that we have committed to doing. Agree on a link-wide data collection process, including how to leverage resources such as the county's PGA department, PGA. And develop assignments, schedule, and a budget for ongoing link-wide survey data collection and analysis. And so Marissa from Canby has graciously volunteered to be the DG champion for this. So as we go forward in this plan, whenever it's time to give an update on this to the rest of the directors group, or when that working on it has a question or needs some clarification, the champion is the one they're going to go to. So it doesn't all fall on one person at the directors. And then finally, we assign who's going to own this task, who's going to be responsible for it. So you can see on that first one, that's that data task force, that link data task force that we have to set up and establish. But we are going to assign to them, hey, figure out a way to do this. You know, we want to collect data on an annual basis that's useful to us and helps us understand what patrons want. Tell us how to do that. And then the directors are going to say, okay, we've got a plan from this group. Now it's up to us to figure out what the schedule is, how we're going to pay for this, you know, how are we going to implement that into our existing local efforts. So that's kind of how that document is laid out. And for every one of those initiatives and tactics, you just go from left to right and kind of narrow down from the strategic to the very, very tactical. Whew. Are there any questions on any of that so far? Or did anybody have any questions on what was sent out? I will say I got 2 more slides, so you know, budget time and your questions, you give me 5 more minutes to finish up with those slides. But if there are any questions from the group, we'd love to hear them.
Questions? Do we have any hands up?
I have a comment. This is brilliant. I could see where this process could be applied for other things that LDAC wants to move forward to do. And this, you guys, it's excellent. I mean, we could apply the same process to the citizens about what they want in the way of library services. I think this is phenomenal. Great work. Great work.
That was actually our thought in creating this strategic.
I totally am on board with
We know
this.
we'll be headed to a vote at some point.
Yep.
And we need we need to know what the community needs and wants.
Yep.
So that we're prepared.
Outstanding process. This is a great roadmap to get to that point where it's written down, everyone's accountable, you've got the data, however you want to say it, collected to say, this is why it's coming before the voters. I love this.
Yeah, and you will see a lot of things in there that talk about exploring this as an option, right? And so this really, in my mind, I think the directors will back me up, this is dreaming big as a consortium. You know, so it may say like exploring the idea of centralizing homebound services to make sure that we provide that to those in need. We are not in a place right now where we could do that, of course. Sure, but this is dreaming big and identifying those things and really laying them out to help communicate. Like the third imperative there is telling her story and making sure that that's.
What a better way to consolidate and get more uniformed and equitable across the board for every citizen in Clackamas County. I absolutely love this. Great job.
People on Zoom? Oh, okay, Nick, go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or not, but it seems to me that as LDAC, that we would want to adopt this if we agree with the directors, because this is core to what's going on. It looks like how that works, but well, we're doing the same thing with the yeah, basically it's the same approach. So it comes, you know, we're getting ongoing reports, certainly kind of cool with that reports to LDAC if we agree that this is a good approach. Because again, it's underlying what's really going on in the district. I think if we don't agree with this as LDAC, we have a problem because they're doing it. So no one's saying it's how is that possible? That aspect of that.
Well, I will say on my behalf, you had me at hello, directors. Having said that, core values, a little bit wordy if the public is going to see this, and we need to sort of, the core value should be 6 key words, and you have lengthy, almost a paragraph for every core value. Now, maybe that's only for the directors, but if other are going to see it, I think it would be nice if the public saw that, but said the core value should be A, B, C, D, E. Something very that they can look at and say, agree with that. Because if they have to read a paragraph, I feel that we've lost them. That's just Al's thought, my little bit of journalism background. So the things we can make simpler for people to understand, because throughout the document, I thought was great because you said, how do we tell the story, the PR aspect of it? We want to make sure that almost every component had a PR aspect to it, which I thought was good because you're involving the community then. So how can we at LDAC help you with this document? I guess that's question number 1. And 2, is this just for internal use, or do you see this being broader than?
We talked about having the strategic plan, and like the link website. And we haven't actually done that. But we haven't had a final version of the tactical plan until recently.
Yeah.
So
I think the plan is to make it public. I will say, from my perspective, it's a capacity issue. I mean, you saw our time frame, how long it took us to do this. I will just remind everybody, there's nothing in the IGA that says this is how we work together, right? This is a commitment that all the library directors have made. Like, we believe in this cooperative, and so we have put forth this work. We've also got other plates spinning there. So yes, I wanted to send out, rather than sending this group individual things, I wanted it to be a nice, pretty thing, and I just did not have time.
What you sent out was
So yes, so I very much like to make this public. One of our things that we'd like to do is we'd also like to get in front of our city managers as a group, and kind of share this with them. We know there will be some questions on there, but yeah, and any feedback on, making it punchier, it's great. I'll speak for myself, I always use 5 words, with 2 good suffice.
So Greg started with 5 words and we got him down to 2.
Yeah.
And then, but still, yeah.
The other thing, I did want to echo one thing that Rick said, a lot of these are explore, look into, because we also realize that a lot of this, it's not, there's only so much we can do. So there are initiatives in there that are related to gathering information and trying to do some of the work that the big task force was originally envisioned to do. And our goal is to get to a new district. Now, we know that's not our choice to make, so we are very cognizant of that when we put in there. We want to set ourselves up for success if and when the time comes to go out for a district.
This
So
is an
that's-
absolutely phenomenal start. I love the collaboration. It's outstanding.
And I think the more we can share those stories and successes, the easier it will be when we do say, let's put a ballot measure out there.
Yep.
I think so. So if I may, that's an excellent segue to my last 2 slides.
Well, before you go, what do you want from LDAC on this? I saw.
That's an even better segue to, because that's the next slide. So first the sad part, then we'll end on it. So as has been mentioned in here, we feel very strongly, we did come to this body in 2018 and said, we have concerns, and it was not, not whether, money was used for capital or operations, not allocated costs. We think all of these issues, a lot of these topics that we talk about are symptoms of an underlying lack, an insufficient revenue stream, right? With a sufficient revenue stream, most of these discussions go away. So, rather than trying to take a too small pie and figuring out how to slice it, our hope in 2018 was, let's talk about it larger. So in 2018, we identified those concerns. I've excerpted the letter that we presented here. I think I speak for all of my director's colleagues. The situation has not changed for the better at all. In many ways, it's probably more dire. If you look at what's happening in Salem, a lot of us look down there and go, oh my goodness, you know, is that our future? So it's more critical than ever that everybody who's dedicated to the success of Link as a cooperative looks to the future. And we believe that the strategic plan that we put together is a roadmap to help us take that first step towards getting where we want to go. It's not perfect, but you know, it's the first step on a longer journey. We will say, and I speak for all of my directors' colleagues, that it is 2024, and Commissioner Savis has said that, and others have said it. We can't continue to debate the concerns and issues of 2008. This district was formed 16 years ago. Yes, there are places that's creaky, where it's not defined, where it could probably work better. Let's go forward and fix this. And really, the way we think of doing this is you're going to have to go out for successor districts. And so we want to urge anybody who is involved in supporting this plan is to look forward to the future. We can't keep arguing and going back and around and around and around. That's an answer. Okay, last slide, please. So what do we think are the critical success factors for making sure that we can do this? So as you've heard from the Link Directors Group, we have already started committing our resources to implementing this plan. We're working on forming a new Link Outreach Committee so that we can do a better job of doing countywide outreach and kind of make better use of limited resources. So we have already committed time, energy, our financial and staff resources to start doing some of the work that we said we want to do. We need all of our stakeholders, our library boards, our friends, our foundations, and critically LDAC, this group. We need your support in these efforts to move forward. We need all Link stakeholders, staff, and advocates to be aligned and committed to telling the story of what Link does, of our successes, what library services, how they benefit our community. We also need all of our stakeholders to understand and focus on the real challenges, concerns, and threats that the district faces now, not 2008, now, and we all need to look to the future and not the past. So that's what our request is from our directors group to this body and to every other body that we're gonna bring this to. It's help us look to the future and help us get to the future that we envision that's going to preserve and improve library services for every single person in Bibles. With that, now I'll shut up. Thank you very much for listening.
Questions or comments first?
Say. Sign me up. I'll support. If you need my help, I'll help.
Anybody on Zoom have a question or comment, concern, thought? Grover?
Yeah, I actually concur with Natalie, and thank you guys for, first of all, 2018, thank you for that letter, and thank you for this. I couldn't agree with more that it's a matter of looking forward to what's going to cause to continue and or contribute to the success of our incredible library district. And it clearly takes us working together. So for that, I thank you for saying what you said, and I couldn't agree with more. Thanks.
Anybody else on Zoom have a comment, concern, thought? You're in the room.
Were any of my library director colleagues wanted to also chip in? I feel like I monopolized the conversation.
I will totally say that we definitely need to look to the future. I can tell you my library does not have enough money to do anything right now. We have barely any staff, and obviously every city is dealing with the same budget issues, so it's not like they can contribute anymore. I think at this point, the only way that we can move forward is if everyone agrees to go in this direction. This is the way that we can make a good change and get services for everyone. In general, this is where we need to be putting our energy. This is where we need to put our fire. And I feel like if we all do that together, then we can be successful. If we're all at each other's throats, that will not happen. So, yeah, and this group, before I even became director, put a lot of work into this. So thank you for doing all.
Yes, thank you.
Any other Tossing from back there, David?
Well, I'll just say that the park board reviewed this and supports it fully. We think that the way forward is now to start planning, literally start planning, move to a new district. A different rate, we could work out the capital issues, we could work out the allocation issues in this new effort. But we've got to turn that page and get this committee to move in that direction. Can't say that any more strongly.
I think we're all in agreement there. Once again, you had me, hello, thank you very much for this effort. At the next meeting, would it be possible, just a thought, would it be possible, you identified that there are 9 categories, I think that you're taking on, if I recall. To just sort of highlight, okay, here's what this category is, here's who's doing it, and here's, if they need help from us, let us know that, okay, this director who's taking on this needs someone else to help, maybe from this committee or from somewhere else to say this and this. But I'd just like to sort of say, those are the 9, because I think it was 9, wasn't it?
There's not, yeah, when we get down to the tactics.
Right, the tactics. These are the
25 to
tactics.
30, but yeah, I believe my director colleagues would be fine with that. I told you, it's July.
That's 2 months.
We'll see if there's a new chair by July, then I'll be really.
But it'd be good to hear from each director who's saying, here's what I'm doing. With, a quick 2 or 3 minute capsule, and then say, this is the help I need from LDAC or from my own library board or from other people.
July is the first month of this plan. We would have started working on some of these things, but so we will be in the very infancy, but each champion should have an idea of the groups they're gonna be working with and with maybe.
So.
That's the size of the thing. LDAC either needs to take this on as, or what we're supporting as our switching plan for a lot of this. And you get it to the point that we can let you. Yeah, that's what. Because this sets the stage. For, we're looking at the financial analysis, looking at maybe some subsequent history. And I think the more that we can put that out there as part of a plan, and assuming we're all in agreement, I still think that the LDAC needs to take this and accept it as strategic plan for the district. And I just see this will take us forward as opposed to, I think I'm a 6th year out back. And let me tell you what I did over the last 6 years. Talk about the same thing pretty much every meeting. This is positive. I think you as LDAC should have, but staff approval that this is the learning agreement. If we don't, then I think we better tell the library that, so we're in trouble. It's serious.
We're going to be creating probably an annual report for this. For our libraries, for us as a whole, the directors group, and we could certainly bring that annual report back to this group to review.
And he had talked about that maybe that becomes a component of the annual report, the progress report to this group. I will say, I'll say, nobody else wants to say. The amount of effort that we spend pulling that data together, if that's what's needed to help us before, we're totally willing to do it. We would gladly spend energy pulling this, forward and sharing that with you. And if there were realizing that we have limited energy, if this information about how we made progress on moving forward, could provide some more information that maybe spending a lot of time on our current plan doesn't provide, would be very willing to focus.
Do you mind if I leapfrog you, just sure take you back?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was gonna say that idea of reporting back is what I was gonna bring up, and I know the scope of this group's work is really to review those annual reports. You look at those stats, say, yep, you're doing a great job. Go. And so taking it on as a group of LDAC on how we support it might be a little tricky in this group, but at least maybe the reps in this group can be the cheerleaders and take that back to individual library advisory boards and kind of drive it at each spot, because my understanding is the city managers and city folks on city councils need to hear that this is wanted by the citizens. So I think that's where we can really, the reps here can really do some important work.
Natalie?
I was gonna say, after seeing this great presentation, I'm hoping that this body will want to tap into how the process that you went about doing this for how we move LDAC forward and develop a new district. So we're hoping that you will walk this body through that. Do you need a motion to say that this is what we want to do moving forward, or?
We can entertain a motion, absolutely. To say, we embrace this and we want it to be part of our group as well. That this is something we affirm. And we want to be part of it moving forward and figuring out how to be part of that moving forward to work with the directors.
How does everybody feel about that here? We don't have a lot of people like me here that tonight, we have mostly directors, but
No, we have,
I feel strongly that this is the way to go. Moving forward in a positive, productive way. Go ahead, Nick.
No, you know where I stand. From that standpoint, I do think. How we want to word it, particularly, but I think we need a person. But again, we don't agree with this. Then what is all that?
I'll make the motion. It might be a little wordy, but I'll try. I would like to make a motion that this body, LDAC, adopts this process in order to move ourselves forward and create a new district. Is that okay?
sure.
I second.
Okay, there's a motion on the table and move it quickly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Unanimous vote.
Yay. Thank you.
Okay, it's getting rather lit. It's 8:35. Usually we hear from every library. In lieu of that, just like to make sure I want to check in on everybody, see one word checkout, as we normally like to do, of how you're feeling after tonight. We've been at this now for 100 minutes or so.
Let's start with Nick.
Well, I'm gonna start with people on the Zoom call, because they've been patient.
Perfect.
So, starting with Mitzi, how are you feeling?
Optimistic.
Grover?
Hopeful.
Can you say that again?
I think you said hopeful, right, Grover? Hopeful?
HOPEFUL.
Natalie?
Positive.
Who else is on there?
You got Sarah Rollwood.
Sarah, you're on there now? Positive, okay, thank you, Sarah.
Got Diana from Malala.
Diana?
I'm gonna say cautious.
Okay.
And then Morgan City.
Denise?
That was Desiree.
Desiree?
Desiree had to jump off.
Denise?
I would say optimistic.
Nick?
Optimistic also.
Greg?
I'll be optimistic, have it.
Bethany?
I was gonna say hopeful.
Sarah?
Energized.
Alyssa?
Feeling engaged.
Natalie?
Exhilarated.
Marissa?
Motivated,
Amy?
excited.
We're gonna also hear from Kathleen. We'll ask everybody. Kathleen, your one word.
Wondering.
Paul?
Well, Natalie took my word, so I'm trying to get all the Scrabble points I can, so I'll just say exhilarating.
David?
Encouraged.
Jeff? Is it Jeff or Jeffrey? What do you prefer? Jeff?
Yeah, sure.
Sarah?
Thankful.
Rick?
Like David said, encouraged.
Graham?
Optimistic.
Doug? It's a thumbs up, and I will just say thankful for everybody being here. So is there a motion for adjournment?
I still don't understand. About that. What kind of notice is supposed to be, do we have, are these meetings noticed? What that process is, and I think that.
Yes, they used to be.
Yeah.
Since we don't have a newspaper anymore, I guess it's just online is.
Yeah, the agenda is posted to the Library District Advisory Committee webpage on the county's website. And so that's always done at least a week in advance. There was obviously some miscommunication and we could have added the presentation onto that. So yeah, we'll make sure to get it up as soon as we have it.
Thank you, Nick, for the question.
And then the other thing is just, a little bit, how we want, that meetings. More specific. So. But I think a lot, it's along their lines also. Because I'm thinking that, as we delve in some of these topics, we're a very large group, so it has to.
Other comments, concerns? Motions?
I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you all very much for being here.
It's all us.